I didn't cry when my husband died, but I almost collapsed when my daughter laughed at me in a jewelry store. We were standing under bright white lights. The glass counter was cold against my hands. Behind it lay my wedding necklace and bangles, gold I had worn for 40 years, now tagged with a price. My daughter leaned against her fiancé, smirking like this was entertainment. She rolled her eyes and said loudly, "Please stop acting like a victim. Those things were just sitting in your locker." People nearby stopped talking. One woman stared. A man pretended to check his phone. No one knew where to look. Then my daughter added, lowering her voice just enough to sting, "You should be grateful. At least your old jewelry finally did something useful." Silence fell like a weight. My chest tightened. My mouth opened, but no words came out. That's when a voice cut through the room. Not hers, not mine, the jeweler. He straightened up, looked directly at me, and said calmly, "Ma'am, I need to correct something right now." Everyone froze. My daughter stiffened. The jeweler continued, louder this time. "Because what your daughter claimed when she sold these pieces doesn't match our records." A ripple moved through the showroom. Her fiancé frowned. 2 customers stepped closer. My daughter whispered, "What are you doing?" For the first time, she looked scared, because she didn't know that I knew this jeweler, and he knew me, and he was about to reveal a truth she never expected. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, you need to go back to last winter, to the evening she came into my room, sat on my bed, and asked me for my wedding jewelry, with a smile that felt wrong. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Social Old channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. I used to believe that the hardest part of my life was already behind me. Raising children alone after loss teaches you strange optimism. You start thinking pain has a limit, that sacrifice eventually gets rewarded. I was wrong, but back then I didn't know it yet. My days were quiet. Too quiet, some people would say. I woke up before sunrise every morning, not because I had to, but because my body remembered responsibility. The house was still. No footsteps, no arguments, just the hum of the ceiling fan and the sound of my own breath. I made tea for one. Out of habit, I still used 2 cups, one for me, one for memory. After my husband died, people expected me to break, to cry loudly, to fall apart in public. I didn't. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it settles in your bones and waits. My husband had been a simple man, not rich, not powerful, but honest. On our wedding day, he didn't promise me comfort. He promised me effort, and he kept it. The necklace he gave me that day wasn't heavy with diamonds. It was simple gold, warm against my skin. The bangles matched it, thin but strong. "Gold doesn't shout," he had said while fastening the clasp. "It lasts." For 40 years, it did. I wore that jewelry through births, hospital corridors, school meetings, and sleepless nights. It rested against my chest when money was short and faith was thinner. When my husband died, I took it off, not because it hurt to see, but because it felt sacred. I placed it in a velvet box and locked it away, not to hide it, to protect it. My daughter grew up watching all of this. She saw the sacrifices, the quiet strength, the way I chose stability over luxury every time. I thought she understood. She was smart, ambitious, confident, everything I wasn't allowed to be at her age. I paid for her education before I fixed the cracks in my own walls. I skipped comforts so she could chase opportunities, and I never complained, because that's what love looks like when you think it's enough. In the beginning, she still visited often, brought stories, laughter, but slowly her visits became shorter. Her phone stayed in her hand longer than my name stayed on her lips. Then she met him, her fiancé. From the first meeting, something felt off. He smiled too quickly, asked questions that sounded polite but felt calculated. What assets do you have? What support will you provide after marriage? I laughed them off, old habits. I wanted to believe the best. My daughter told me he was practical, that I wouldn't understand his world. I nodded. Mothers nod a lot. Winter came early that year, the kind of cold that makes you grateful for locked doors and old memories. That was when she came into my room one evening, sat on my bed, smiled in a way that made my hands stop moving, and asked me for my wedding jewelry. But that moment is where everything truly began to fall apart. She didn't ask again right away. That silence after her request felt deliberate, like she was waiting for me to convince myself. I sat on the bed, my hands resting on the folded dupatta, watching her face. She looked calm, too calm. "You don't even wear it anymore," she said, glancing toward the locker. Her voice was soft, almost reasonable. "I wear it here," I replied, touching my chest. She sighed. "Mom, please don't make this dramatic." That word again, dramatic. As if 40 years of marriage could be reduced to a mood. I asked her what she needed it for exactly. She leaned back on her hands, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Just a few events," she said. "Engagement dinner, maybe one family gathering." Maybe. I noticed she didn't look at me when she said it. Her phone buzzed. She checked it immediately, smiled, then looked back at me like nothing had happened. "His mother noticed I don't have much gold," she added casually. "You know how people talk." People. Always people. I stood up slowly and walked toward the locker. Not to open it, just to stand near it. "You know this isn't just gold," I said. "It's memory." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Memory won't help me survive in that house," she said. "Respect will." I turned to face her. "And you think respect comes from borrowed things?" Her jaw tightened. "Why are you making this about morality?" she snapped. "I'm not stealing it." Not yet. That thought crossed my mind uninvited. I pushed it away, because believing your child would betray you feels worse than any truth. "You raised me to be practical," she continued. "Now you're acting emotional." That sentence landed carefully. She knew where to hit. I walked back to the bed and sat down, suddenly tired. "Your father gave me this," I said quietly. "He placed it around my neck." She rolled her eyes. "Dad is gone, Mom." Gone. As if he had simply stepped out of the room. "You keep holding on to things," she said, standing up. "Life moves forward." She walked toward the door, then stopped. "I really need this," she said, not turning around. "Don't make me ask again." The door closed behind her. Not softly. I didn't move for a long time. The room felt colder. That night, I opened the locker. Not because I planned to give it to her, but because I needed to see it. The velvet box was still there. I opened it. The gold rested quietly, exactly where I had left it. I ran my fingers over the necklace. I remembered my husband's hands. Steady. Certain. "Gold doesn't shout," he had said. "It lasts." I closed the box, locked the locker, and told myself, she's my daughter. She wouldn't cross that line. I went to sleep believing trust was still intact. I was wrong, because the next morning, something felt different. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The house felt off. Not loud, not broken, just wrong. I made tea and carried the cup to my room, careful not to spill. Steam curled into the air, warming my hands, but the feeling in my chest stayed cold. I don't know why I walked to the locker. Instinct, maybe, or the way a mother senses danger before it speaks. I unlocked it. The sound of metal clicking open was familiar, comforting. I bent down and reached for the velvet box. That's when I noticed it. The box was lighter, not empty, just wrong. My fingers hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside, the cloth lining was folded neatly, too neatly. The necklace wasn't there. The bangles weren't there. I stared, waiting for my eyes to correct themselves. They didn't. For a moment, my mind refused to move forward. It stayed stuck between possibilities. Maybe I moved them. Maybe I placed them somewhere else. Maybe... No. I sat down on the floor. The teacup tipped over, spilling across the tiles, but I didn't notice. My hands were shaking now. I searched the locker again. Every shelf, every corner. Nothing. The room felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in. I called her, straight to voicemail. I sent a message. Did you take the jewelry? No reply. Minutes passed, then an hour. I told myself she was busy, that there had to be an explanation. Mothers give their children endless chances, not because children deserve them, but because the alternative is unbearable. When she finally replied, it was one line. Relax, I told you I needed it. That was it. No apology, no question mark, just a statement. I read it again, and again. My hands went cold. She hadn't asked, she hadn't borrowed, she had decided. I typed back slowly. You should have told me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. I spent the rest of the day walking from room to room, touching things, grounding myself. That night, she didn't come home. She didn't call. And I realized something terrifying. She knew exactly what she had done, and she didn't think it mattered. Days passed, then weeks. When she finally came by, she acted normal. Too normal. She hugged me quickly, avoided my eyes. Don't worry, she said, pulling away. I'll return it after the wedding stuff settles. Wedding stuff. As if my life's memories were inconvenient clutter. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, because something inside me had gone quiet. Not forgiving, observing. That was when trust stopped feeling safe and started feeling like a liability. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the worst part. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of afternoon where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. I was peeling vegetables in the kitchen, the radio playing softly in the background. My hands moved on habit alone. When my phone rang, I almost ignored it. Unknown number. I wiped my hands and answered anyway. Good afternoon, ma'am, a man said politely. This is from the jewelry showroom on Market Road. My chest tightened. Yes, I said. We recently purchased some gold items under your family name, he continued. I'm calling to confirm ownership for our records. I leaned against the counter. I didn't sell anything, I said slowly. There was a pause, not awkward, careful. Your daughter sold them, he said gently. She said she had your permission. The knife slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I stared at the wall. Permission. I never gave permission, I said. Another pause. I'm sorry, he replied. We believed her. I sat down. My legs had stopped working. He explained things I barely heard. Dates, signatures, declarations, all official, all final. When the call ended, the kitchen felt too quiet. I didn't cry, not then. I walked to my room and sat on the bed where she had once sat and smiled. That smile made sense now. I understood why she had avoided my eyes, why she had been so calm. She hadn't borrowed, she had already sold. I felt foolish, not because I trusted her, but because I trusted that love would stop her. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every conversation we'd had that winter, every sigh, every roll of her eyes. I remembered the way she had said, "Dad is gone," as if that gave her permission to erase everything he left behind. The next time she came over, I didn't mention the call. I watched her instead. How easily she lied, how smoothly she talked about wedding plans, how she avoided any mention of gold. And I realized she had already moved on. I was the only one still holding on. Weeks later, she invited me to visit the jewelry store with her, to pick something small, she said, for the wedding. I agreed, not because I wanted to go, but because part of me needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I didn't know that visit would end in public humiliation, that her laughter would echo louder than grief, that a stranger would speak when I couldn't. But that day was coming. The showroom smelled like polish and money. Bright white lights hung from the ceiling, unforgiving and sharp. Glass counters reflected every movement, every flaw. I stood beside my daughter, my hands resting lightly on the cold glass. Too cold. Behind it lay my wedding necklace and bangles. I recognized them instantly, not because of their shine, but because of the tiny scratch on one bangle from the year we moved houses and I had carried boxes myself. They were tagged now, with prices. My daughter leaned into her fiancé, her arm looped through his like she needed support, or maybe like she needed an audience. She smiled, not at me, at the situation. "See?" she said lightly, nodding toward the jewelry. "They're still here." Still here, as if they had just been misplaced. I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. "You sold them," I said, quietly. She laughed, actually laughed. The sound echoed just enough for people nearby to notice. "Oh my God," she said, rolling her eyes. "Please stop acting like a victim." Her fiancé smirked. She continued, louder now. "Those things were just sitting in your locker. Just sitting, like they had no life attached to them." I felt heat rush to my face. People around us slowed down. A woman pretending to browse earrings froze. A man stopped mid-sentence and stared at his phone without scrolling. Silence began to stretch. "You should be grateful," my daughter added, lowering her voice just enough to sting. "At least your old jewelry finally did something useful." That word, useful. My chest tightened. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time since my husband died, I felt small, publicly small, like my life had been reduced to an inconvenience. The silence was thick now, heavy. I could hear my own breathing. Then, a voice cut through the room. "Ma'am?" Not hers, not mine. The jeweler. He had straightened up behind the counter. His tone was calm, professional, but firm. "I need to correct something right now." Every head turned. My daughter stiffened. Her smile cracked just slightly. The jeweler looked directly at me, then at her. "Because what your daughter claimed when she sold these pieces," he said, "does not match our records." A ripple moved through the showroom. Her fiancé frowned. Two customers stepped closer. My daughter whispered sharply, "What are you doing?" For the first time, she looked scared, and I realized something important. She had never expected anyone to speak up. She thought silence was guaranteed. She was wrong. The jeweler didn't rush. That's what made it worse for her. He reached under the counter and pulled out a thin folder. Brown. Ordinary. He opened it carefully, like this wasn't drama, just procedure. "When your daughter sold these items," he said evenly, "she signed a declaration." My daughter laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Why are you dragging this out?" He didn't look at her. He looked at the paper. "She stated the jewelry was inherited," he continued, "and no longer wanted by the original owner." Unwanted. The word hung in the air. I felt something tighten behind my ribs, but I didn't move. Her fiancé turned to her. "You said your mother agreed," he said. She waved her hand dismissively. "She did, she just doesn't like being reminded." The jeweler finally looked up. "There's more," he said. Her smile froze. "Our records also show," he went on, "that she requested the valuation be kept lower than market price." The fiancé's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" he asked. She shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Paperwork, it's normal." The jeweler shook his head. "It isn't," he said. "Not unless you're trying to avoid traceability." The room shifted. People were no longer pretending. They were watching. "She also stated," the jeweler added, voice firmer now, "that the items were hers to dispose of, with no claim from the original owner." I straightened my back. For the first time, I spoke. "They were never unwanted," I said quietly. Every sound in the room seemed to stop. The jeweler nodded. "Ma'am," he said, turning to me, "I remember you." He smiled just slightly. "You came here for decades, cleaning, repairs, never selling." A murmur spread. "She used to say," he continued, "this gold isn't for emergencies, it's for dignity." My daughter snapped, "Enough!" But it was too late. Her fiancé stepped back. "You told me your mother didn't care," he said slowly. "You told me this jewelry meant nothing to her." She opened her mouth, closed it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was revealing. I looked at my daughter, not with anger, with clarity. And that scared her more than shouting ever could. Because lies can survive noise. They don't survive truth. No one spoke for a moment. The showroom felt smaller now. Not because of the space, but because the truth had taken up all the air. My daughter stood frozen, her hands clenched at her sides. The confidence she walked in with had drained from her face. Her fiancé looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You lied to me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, I didn't," she said too quickly. "I just simplified things." Simplified. That's what people call cruelty when they don't want to name it. I took a step forward. My legs felt steady, stronger than I expected. "I didn't cry when my husband died," I said calmly. "But today, I finally understand why." She looked at me, confused. "Because death," I continued, "ends something honestly. Betrayal doesn't." Her eyes filled, not with regret, but with fear. Fear of being exposed, not fear of hurting me. I turned to the jeweler. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. Then I turned back to my daughter. "You didn't just sell my jewelry," I said. "You sold the story of who I was." She whispered my name. For the first time, it sounded small. "I didn't raise you to survive by erasing others," I added, "but you chose that anyway." I stepped back. There was nothing left to say. I walked toward the door. Not fast, not shaking. Every step felt deliberate. Behind me, I heard her fiancé say, "I need some air." I didn't look back. Outside, the sunlight felt warmer than it should have. I stood there for a moment, breathing. Then I kept walking. That evening, my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't answer, not out of revenge. but because for the first time in my life, I chose silence over sacrifice. Some lessons cost gold, others cost relationships, but the most expensive one? Learning that love without respect is just another form of loss. And this time, I refused to pay it again. If your own child treated you like this, would you still stay silent? Tell me in the comments.